Well, we made it another week.
Another week.
We
And,
survived.
well, and we're doing this even after the Memorial Day weekend. I'm surprised we have any notes whatsoever.
I was thinking tonight was going to be a pretty lame show and we wasn't going to be able to really get anything in. But as it would turn out, Tuesday morning, man, I mean, politics is the gift that just keeps on giving.
Yeah, when we first started out this morning, I was like, man, what are we going to talk about? And I reached out to you. I was like, hey, got any ideas on what we're going to talk about? And lo and behold, we have stuff to talk about. And we've had a guest just straggle into the show here. What's up,
I
Scott?
mean,
Hey guys, how's it going?
Scott, thanks for coming on short notice. Just you were thinking the same thing that we were thinking, and we're glad you can make it. And you obviously were paying attention to politics too this morning.
Well, it's kind of a curse of my occupation doing as the guy that does the hayride and writing a column at the American Spectator. I have to pay attention to these people, and of course, this morning there was the verdict in the Michael Sussman trial up in D.C., which nobody didn't expect that verdict, which was, the guy's not guilty of lying to the FBI, despite the fact that they had him lying to the FBI in writing, and then billing Hillary Clinton's campaign for the lie. And that wasn't good enough for the DC jury, right?
Oh,
Which
it
doesn't
was it
say,
was it was worse than that, Scott. Let me stop you. It was worse than that. Rex, go to cut two real quick.
Oh,
Cut
wait.
two.
You're
He
you're getting
didn't
me to
just
go to cuts right off the bat. All right,
Yeah,
hold on. Let
he
me
didn't,
switch
and I hate
screens.
to do this while we got a guest. He didn't
no,
just
go
bill
ahead.
her for his services. He billed her for more than that.
Well, isn't that like the politician, swamp way? Hold on, cut two. Let me find cut two here. Here we go.
He
Cut
he
two, flash drives.
he
Oh,
billed her for
Legos.
more than that. He billed her for the freaking flash drives that he took to the
Right,
FBI.
right, right. I mean, it's it's the like the problem was not with the case that John Durham's office brought. In any other jurisdiction with any other jury in America, that would have been a slam dunk case, and it probably would have never gone to trial because Sussman would have absolutely, turned state's evidence. And what do you guys want to know? I will absolutely cut a deal. I will trade up, whether it's Mark Elias or any of these other people. Who can I throw under the bus to keep from going to jail? In DC, it's a totally different deal, right? Because they knew who the jury was going to be. And the jury was going to be a bunch of federal workers, a bunch of swamp rat, you know, uh, lobbyists and DNC donors. They even had somebody on the jury whose daughter's on the swim team with Sussman's daughter. I mean, any other jurisdiction other than, some small town Appalachia where everybody is cousins with the defendant, you would have never had this kind of thing. And then, people
You,
kind of laugh at, these hillbillies up in the woods and you can't get anybody on bootleg. And they have a much fairer judicial system than there is in Washington, D.C., right? This is a place where if you protest a stolen election, they put you under the jail, solitary confinement, and won't give you medical attention when your feet are falling off from gangrene or whatever, right? But this guy who is totally guilty, they're like, oh, I don't think there's anything wrong. It is such a third world banana republic situation up there right now that it threatens the continued existence of America as we know it, because there is clearly a two-tiered judicial system, particularly operating out of the nation's capital, in which regular Americans cannot get a fair shake, but the elite are coddled and taken care of in ways that you wouldn't have seen even in, say, pre-revolutionary France, where at least they had to try to keep up appearances and they would guillotine one of the nobles here and there. That doesn't ever happen here. The only thing that'll happen is like a Jeffrey Epstein gets disappeared while he's in prison, sort of as a lesson to anybody else that might put themselves in a position with Epstein. You never find any of the Clinton or Obama elite have to face the judicial music for things that they do that are illegal. I can't think of it
well,
any. When have you ever seen anybody that
well,
served in the Obama administration got indicted and convicted. Has that happened? Am I just missing somebody that happened to? I don't even know of any Clinton officials that
Yeah.
happened to. Bill Richardson didn't get busted for anything, and you know how dirty he was.
Well, Scott, this goes back to like you started saying. There were three Hillary Clinton donors on the jury pool. There was one whose daughter went to school with Sussman's or kid at school. One of those. There was also an AOC supporter. I mean, the
Correct.
statistics are that 92% of the jury pool up there are Democrat. Hillary Clinton supporters.
Right.
So the problem, I mean, is
And had you had a judge who was even remotely not part of the problem, he would have immediately moved the trial to a different venue, right? He would have said that, I like you can't. This is the same thing as the guy who commits a high profile murder in a city, and they say we got to move the venue of this where the defendant can get a fair trial or whatever. The judge would have probably moved that out, and of course. Which there's some discussion. I was like, well, this guy Baker is the one that screwed it up because he took the meeting in Washington, and if he hadn't done that, then they would have done this thing in the Northern District of Virginia. And it's like, yeah, and you think it was an accident that Baker took the meeting in D.C. rather than in Virginia? Like, are you honestly going to believe that? Because let's face it, this thing. I mean, they knew from the get-go that they were going to get away with this, and they did everything they could to make sure that they were right. And they were.
Right.
And other than getting a public black eye from Durham, essentially showing the American public what he had and making it very obvious to anyone who's objective about this, that this was a complete and total screw job that affected a sitting American president, duly elected, and essentially an attempted coup against the constitutionally designated chief executive of the country, and they did this knowing they could get away with it, which is it's a serious thing, and it points to like a lot bigger issue that I think we're going to talk about in a little bit of what's required to preserve the safety and security of the actual constitutional republic that we live in.
That is exactly what I was going to say. I mean, look, and I hate to cut you off, but what I'm going to say is what do you think the leaker on the Supreme Court thinks right now? What do they think their odds of getting discipline?
I mean, that's a related thing because it comes out also today that, well, now we're asking these guys to turn in their cell phone records. And it's like, you didn't do that a month ago? Like, why are we not, like, why didn't that happen the day the leak came out? Is that every single clerk at the Supreme Court gets called in and says, okay, guys, serious business. Everybody turn in your cell phones because we're going to find out right here and now who leaked this thing. And oh, by the way, when we find out it's you, you're fired and you're going to be prosecuted. They wait a month and then nothing. Like, they wait a month. Members of the U.S. Supreme Court have been getting death threats for an entire month as a result of this leak, right? That is, and it was very foreseeable that leaking this would create those death threats, which tells me that you're basically an accessory to the crime of threatening a federal official and whatever. And a month goes by and nothing happens.
That's not to excuse them, and I'm assuming you're feigning shock of all this, but they were going to get the death threats anyway once the ruling came out. I'm not saying it should have been leaked. Don't get me wrong, but
this adds to the seriousness of the death threats. In that, killing, say, Clarence Thomas, while this thing is not fully published, makes the 5-3-1 Supreme Court breakdown on the Dobbs case 4-3-1. And essentially what that does is it makes John Roberts the fifth vote for upholding the Mississippi statute, but not overturning Roe v. Wade. So there was a legitimate motivation to carry out those death threats. And I guess there still is until this thing is actually published. So that's why the lag time between the leak and the actual decision when it comes out is dangerous, because you can actually affect law and public policy based on whether somebody actually carries these things out. It's a recrimination for the decision once it's published if somebody were to carry that out and assassinate one of the Supreme Court justices. So, I mean, this has some legitimate meaning behind this.
And to the folks watching, what we're getting at here is we are legitimizing, illegal behavior, I mean, criminal behavior. It's criminal. We're legitimizing criminal behavior if and as long as you're a resident of the District of Columbia, the heart of our country. And that's what we're here to talk about. The Sussman case is a prime example of how our system is flawed. And that's what brought us to this point of having you come on the show, Scott, because you've obviously had an idea, and I've been beating Rex over the head over it, talking about it for a while, but nobody listens to us. But I think some people maybe are waking up. So you made a post, and Rex, I think you've got that clip. Why don't we post that up there, Scott's post? And you've got an article coming out in the Spectator, right, Scott, on this subject?
Correct. Yeah, this thing was that you guys are about to show is a kind of a preview of the column that I've got going up tomorrow, talking about like you really want to drain the swamp. The thing to do is to move all the federal agencies out of Washington. It's 280 something thousand people who are federal employees that live and work in D.C. And if you toss them, out of Washington and make them cite themselves in all these other places around the country, Washington all of a sudden becomes a city somewhat similar to the rest of the country in that people who work in the private sector are most of the people who live and work in Washington. Whereas, DC's, 600,000 people and 280,000 work for federal agencies. And that doesn't count all the lobbyists and government contractors and people like that who ply their trade dealing with the federal agencies. Like that is the industry in Washington, D.C. And what that does is it basically creates Washington. I mentioned the French Revolution a little earlier. Washington is Versailles, essentially. Like back in the day, Versailles was a whole bunch of people whose job was to essentially go, be a sycophant to the king and some of the inside nobles at court. And that was like the entire industry of the town. And of course, when the French Revolution came along, the first thing everybody did was get their pitchforks and their torches and march on Versailles. You don't really want to see that here, but we're moving in that direction when, a case like the Sussman case comes up and there is absolutely no, recognition that, hey, this is the kind of slam dunk case you really can't fix the trial. And yet they did. So, the number one thing to do is you take all these federal agencies and you spread them out all over the country. And the cocktail parties that the employees go to are going to be cocktail parties in Detroit or in Miami or Sioux Falls or Topeka, Kansas or wherever, and not Washington, D.C. cocktail parties. And the social scene in D.C. is totally different people. Which is, I think, healthy if you do it that way, because they have to actually live amongst the people they govern.
Yeah. So, look, here's the thing, Scott. A crime committed in D.C. is a crime against everybody in the whole country, right?
If in a case like this, absolutely, yeah.
So
I mean, a mugging on the street in D.C. is not, but one of these kind of cases, absolutely, it's a crime committed against the entire country.
Yeah. So how is it that a jury of your peers of a small group of people in the District of Columbia, how is that representative of the victims, which is the whole country? It's not.
That's like a separate solution to this altogether, right? Which is that the D.C. District Court no longer draws its jury pool from D.C., but would have to draw it from the entire country.
That's an idea.
I mean, it would be more expensive to do it that way, but wow, that would be fun. Yeah, if you can't move federal agencies out of Washington, then I would say that would be like if these Republicans that supposedly going to get the majority in Congress come January,
I mean, look,
that'd be something to pass, which is to say, okay, you got to draw your jury pool from sea to shining sea, and you'll have people from California and Maine and Louisiana and Kansas and all these other places in there. And no, you can't just get a DC jury. I like that. I think that's a pretty good idea.
Well, I
Bingo.
gotta point out a couple
If we
of
can
things.
hang on, Rex, if we can send 40 billion to Ukraine, we can
Oh,
damn
sure.
sure spend 40 billion to fly people from New Orleans, Baton Rouge, no, not Baton Rouge. Let's leave that one out. Bossier City to DC. I mean, we can do it.
Well,
Sure.
I got to point out a couple of things. First, I'm jealous because Scott's soapbox is much taller than mine. Secondly, I see a flaw in Scott's little premise right off the bat. Why do you want to send the Department of Education to New Orleans or Houston?
Energy.
Oh,
DOE
DOE.
is energy.
Okay.
The
Okay.
Department of Education, I would send to hell. I would disband
Thank
the
you.
Department of Education and the Department of Homeland Security, which did not exist prior to 9/11.
Okay.
But and let's face it, wasn't overly necessary prior to 9/11.
But why send? Okay, so Department of Energy.
yeah,
Why
but
send Department of Energy to New Orleans?
I agree with. I still
Why
want to
send
know that one.
anything to New Orleans?
Well, like I said, it could go to Oklahoma. Actually, the best idea for the Department of Energy is to send it to Midland, Texas. Because if you're DOE and you say, oh, well, you can't drill for oil in Midland, Texas, then the people of Midland, Texas show up with flamethrowers and burn your office down, which would actually be a good thing.
Look,
if they were
I'll split the difference with you. Houston sounds good. We had a lot of people from New Orleans that transplanted into Houston. That would be a good fit. We'll split the difference. We'll call it Houston.
I'm okay with. Look, I'm like what I'm saying is the Department of Energy should move someplace where energy is being created. Okay, I mean, if you wanted to put that in Williston, North Dakota, I'd be fine with that. If you wanted to put it in, there's places in Colorado where they make energy. I'd be okay with that. But the Department of Energy needs to be in a place where energy production is a big industry in the area where it is. Because the big thing is this: if you did that, then the bureaucrats at the Department of Energy would be at luncheons and prayer breakfasts and at church or in bars or whatever with people in the energy industry, and not lobbyists and people who engage in other things, and also not with representatives of the Saudi government who are trying to convince them that we should buy all our oil from Saudi Arabia rather than make it ourselves. But the point is, and that doesn't just apply to DOE. I mean, you can take Department of Transportation. If you put it in Detroit, then all the stupid CAFE standards and everything else you get. I mean, they would see people who work for car manufacturers saying, "I'm going to lose my job if y'all do this particular thing." And all of a sudden, the culture of the agency then reflects the place that it is. Whereas, it's definitely doing that now, and it's Washington, which is hostile to all of these different things that they regulate.
So again, I'm playing devil's advocate here because I agree with your premise absolutely. The problem is that I voted for Trump twice, would vote for him again, but I knew from the get-go the reason I voted for Trump was not because I had any aspirations that he could drain the swamp. That was a line of BS to get people behind him to vote for him. I voted for him because of SCOTUS picks. That's it, and the other judiciary picks. Okay, that's it. I don't care what else he did. But and again, I'm playing devil's advocate because I agree with your premise, but this to me sounds like when I was a child and my mother would put a plate of food in front of me, and as a child I was a picky eater. Now I'll eat just about anything, but I used to shove my food around on the plate to make it look not so full, but it was still the same amount of food on the plate. So I think the real problem is we got to get not drain the swamp. The swamp's got to go, period.
Well, okay. But remember, you can't just do all of it, right? This is you have to ratchet it down. The way it was ratcheted up, it has to be ratcheted down. One way to ratchet this is when you force these bureaucrats to move with the agency, right? Let's say Commerce moves to Charlotte, right? or wherever you're going to move it, St. Louis or someplace. And when they were going to move these, it wasn't all of the Department of Agriculture. It was just a big piece of it. They were going to move that to Kansas City, and more than half of the people whose jobs were going to move to Kansas City said, "I'm not moving. I'll quit."
Ding, 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 ding.
Right.
Okay.
Like, what's the problem? Sounds like a winner, right? You're going to quit. Not only that, you get to save money because you're hiring people at the new place where you're going to put this based on the cost of living, which is 25% less than it is in DC. So the whole point is these guys are like, maybe they get to keep their current salary, but they're not going to get a raise anytime soon because, hey, you just got a raise. The cost of living where you live now is much less than it is in Washington, so you're covered. And then all the new hires to replace the people who are quitting because they want to live in Washington, and God knows what they're going to do for a living, and who cares? Like, those people, you can pay a lot less. So you're going to cut the cost on your salaries. You're going to run off probably the worst people in Washington, right? Are the ones that are like refuse to leave Washington to go do a job. So I mean, like, that's two massive wins right there. And then the other thing is because all these people, like half these people won't even follow their job, you can eliminate their job. Right. And so you get to actually shrink the bureaucracies. And when you shrink the bureaucracies, you have to then shrink their scope. And therefore, you've reduced the size and scope of government. So I agree that it's somewhat like pushing your food around the plate, but some of the food's going to fall off the plate. And then the dog will eat it. And then, like, that problem's partially
Yeah.
solved. Now,
Okay, $1 million question. Where do we move DOJ?
Well, I said in the thing, move it to Chicago or Philadelphia because they can actually use a DOJ. DOJ's got to go somewhere where the corruption is like so endemic that it's actually worse than Washington. So that at least you can say, well, we moved DOJ there, and one of the things they're going to do is try to clean up this town. So Chicago, Philadelphia, St. Louis, anywhere in New Jersey would work. I don't want it to come to Louisiana because I noticed that the more judges and lawyers we have in this state, the worse things get. So don't come here. But I would get DOJ out of Washington. Absolutely, for certain, that has to happen. And some of the parts of DOJ, like for example, the FBI has got to get out of DC. You cannot continue to have the FBI in DC. The FBI is now basically an oppressive institution at this point. It patently does not serve the interests of the people at all. They're not. That's not the only piece of DOJ. And obviously, the vast majority of DOJ's employees are spread out all over the country. So we're only talking about sort of the core office space. But it can't be in DC. It's got to move somewhere. I kind of don't even care where it goes, but it's got to move somewhere.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, and look, it ain't like we don't have a congressman that sits on the Judiciary Committee. It isn't like that we have a congressman that is, kind of high up the food chain. It isn't like we don't have a senator that has the ear of every major news organization that could actually push a movement like this. The question is whether any of them have the courage to jump out there and try to move the needle. I mean, the clock's fixing to be ticking, and the ability to do it is coming.
Well, that's true. And what I would say is that there's an old line from Milton Friedman that I think is really appropriate here, which is he said, "You don't make things better. You don't fix things by putting the right people in power. You fix them by making it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right things." So the big thing I would say is just let's talk about this until we're blue in the face. Let's recruit people to be part of that, part of the movement to make this happen. Let's advocate, let's agitate, and let's make it so that this thing polls well, and people who are running for office think, well, hell, I can run on this, and if I run on it and make that promise, then I'm going to have to at least work on it and do it. It's probably going to take 10 years to make this happen. I mean, there's something like this, you can't get this done, automatically. But I think there are a whole lot of people that would see the positivity of something like this as it would relate. And I think almost everybody, left and right at this point, is totally disgusted with Washington as it works. I mean, the Bernie Sanders people hate things in Washington.
Yeah.
Their solution is to bring a freaking rifle and shoot at congressmen. And then Bernie Sanders, who talks about a political revolution, says, well, I never said anybody should get shot. It's like, okay, Bernie. But I mean, like even those guys are not, they don't look at Washington, D.C. as a positive place. So I think like the country as a whole, I mean, we get 75% of the population says the country's headed in the wrong direction. That's not love for Washington, D.C. So I think, this is a way that you can say, all right, look, let's have a true government, by and for the people. And I think a lot of people would go for that. Not to mention, you get all these governors of all these states and these mayors of these cities are, oh, I could get 10,000 jobs in my town, right? And this is, Washington doesn't have a congressman or a senator, right? Like they complain all the time, oh, we don't have any representation. It's like, well, you should suffer for that then.
But as soon as we push this idea, they're going to want to be a state.
Well, I would just turn Washington. I'd take Washington D.C. and I'd put it as part of Maryland. Problem solved, right? It's a blue state. It's more blue voters, and everybody else can say, "Okay, now you got what you wanted. Now you can shut up."
It's already a national park. Just make it a permanent national park. Something.
Yeah, I could kick the people out. I'd be good with that. Let the bears and antelope take over.
I mean, look, if somebody wants to take their kids and go up there and to visit, it's an act of Congress, literally, for them to even be able to do that now. I mean, let's get all the junk out of there so people can take their kids to visit the Capitol.
Well, I mean, what I would really like to see for Washington, and Washington would be better off as a city if it had it, was for all of these federal offices to have to clean out because the agencies went away, and they would have the cheapest office space in America, and you'd get nothing but startup, entrepreneurs, tech guys, and whatever. Like, well, let's just do it in Washington. The living is cheap and the office space is cheap. They got, empty houses and empty office buildings everywhere. And hey, let's go. I mean, we're going to move into Washington. And then that becomes like, a capitalist town where people are doing business all day. And like, oh yeah, plus they have the U.S. Capitol. It's like down the street, but we don't, none of the stuff we do involves that. That would make that a much healthier city. Because if you go to Washington, I'll tell you a little story, and this actually shows up in the American Spectator column. So the people who are watching this probably don't even need to read it tomorrow, and I don't know why I'm giving away the ghost here. But anyway, last time I was in Washington was October of last year. The American Spectator every year does its annual banquet, and it's a big deal, and they do it at the Trump International Hotel and all this kind of stuff. So I got there, the day before, and that night I'm sitting in the hotel bar, just kind of, I call all my friends there in DC. Hey, I'm in town. They're like, yeah, you need to come to Alexandria because, like, I work in DC, and when I go home, I'm not coming back to DC for any kind of. You have to pay me to go there. I'm like, okay, all right. So I'm kind of stuck by myself. I was like, all right, well, kind of don't want to just sit in the hotel room. So I'm hanging out in the bar in the Trump Hotel, and it's freaking great. And then I've noticed it's like, okay, like I've had, 3 cocktails and they're $20 a piece. And I'm like, okay, I got to find a freaking bar that's like not going to break me. So I actually walk down the street and there's this place called Harry's Pub, which you walk in and it's like, okay, well, this looks like an ordinary, like American bar. Like it's, kind of a cool place. And, walk in, you got all these people. It was like, I think the football game on, it was like a Thursday night or whatever. And, like there's a bunch of Steelers fans in there. And I'm like, it's pretty good for Washington, right? Like I didn't even think there was a place like this in DC. And so I'm on my phone. I'm kind of talking to some people sitting next to me at the bar or whatever. Like, hey, y'all come to this place? Oh, yeah, this is a great place or whatever. And I'm reading, and I pull up an article by the Washingtonian, all right, which is the society rag in DC. And I mean, if you want to talk about left wing, I mean, like, I'm looking at all the links next to this article that I pulled up about Harry's Bar, and it's about, like how wonderful the trans movement is making progress in the DC schools. Oh, geez. Anyway, so I'm reading this piece, and they're like, "Oh, Harry's Bar, that notorious eyesore where all the Trump people hang out, and why is this place still in business? And shouldn't it be shut down?" And I'm reading like this is like a serious article that this idiot woman wrote about how terrible the Trump bar is in Washington. I just happened to stumble in because it's like 2 blocks from the hotel, and I'm reading it, and I like showed the phone to the bar, like, "This is you guys?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, that came out last fall, and we all had a big laugh about it." I'm like, "We want to shut you down." She's like, "I know, yeah." Like, and I'm going, "Okay." In Philadelphia, they have Harry's pubs all over the place. In freaking San Francisco, you can find a Harry's pub. Chicago is like miles and miles of Harry's pubs, right? And these are all big Democrat cities, but they're all blue collar, kind of sports bar type places where people who may or may not vote Republican go hang out. I mean, it's unremarkable to have a bar like that. In Washington, it's entirely remarkable. Like, you cannot have that. They actually, the Society Rag in DC goes and puts up an article about how terrible it is that there was a sports bar where Trump fans might freaking hang out. Like, and it didn't occur to me that like how totally different from the rest of the country Washington is. And it's literally true. I mean, talk to anybody who lives and works there, like, this is a whole different kind of place. Like big cities that Democrats run. I mean, there's one in every state, or more than one in every state. Okay, like, that's not special. But in none of those places are you totally unwelcome if you happen to vote Republican. And in Washington, that's what you are. You're like an oppressed minority. Like that you can't have a city like that running the country. Like that is so unbelievably unhealthy for a constitutional republic to be governed by a place that has that much contempt for, I mean, I was going to say half the country, but it's really more than half now because, DC's choice for president is like hated by 60% of the population now. And yet he's, got 90% freaking popularity in Washington. Well, and that's the city in the country that I don't want to say controls everybody else, but certainly thinks it does and tries to.
Well,
that's a real serious problem.
You know whose fault this is, right?
Well, it's our fault ultimately for allowing
that 75% of people that you quoted earlier that are dissatisfied or whatever the stat was. Well, they're also the same 75% of people that keep putting those morons back in D.C. That's the problem. It's not getting rid of D.C. It's getting rid of what's going on in the rest of the country. The D.C. is just a symptom of that.
Well, but D.C. is like a crystallized symptom of it, right? Like D.C. is a kidney stone that comes from things that are happening elsewhere in the body. The problem is that the kidney stone has got to be passed out of the body, right? So, I don't disagree with you. I think you're correct. But what I would say is, but that's the focus of the problem that needs to be addressed. And if we can do that, and moving these agencies out is one way to address it. I think congressional term limits, although I wouldn't go draconian with those, because then what you'd have is a lot of the congressional staffers would be running the freaking country lock, stock, and barrel. But some form of term limits to weed out the Pelosi's and the Mitch McConnells and the Lindsey Grahams and people like that, I think is a good idea and would certainly serve to ameliorate the problem to some extent. And then just the size and scope of government has got to come down. I mean, these people think that they can control every aspect of their lives, and that was never intended by the framers, and it's never worked anywhere it's been tried.
Well, let me put this quote up that we just shared out on Bossier Watch, and the quote is, "Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those are," which is attributed to Benjamin Franklin. And again, therein lies the problem. The average person out here, people are getting more and more educated because we're in the information age and all that, but the problem is that most people are waking up trying to go to work, trying to make enough money to put gas in their car or vehicle to get to work, and trying to afford groceries these days. They're not on the band. They might say that they're on the bandwagon with getting rid of the swamp and draining the swamp, and it sounds great. But the problem is all the folks who continue to vote these same people in, who continue to listen to all this crap. You're right about the kidney stone analogy, but if you don't get rid of your habits that started the kidney stones, which, some of it's hereditary, but a lot of it has to do with what you drink and different things.
You're going to keep having kidney stones. I agree.
That's right. So, again, that's why I mentioned earlier, I agree with your premise 100%. But it's just playing whack-a-mole. And instead of having all the moles in one little contained area, now when you go in Chuck E. Cheese, you've got 40 different whack-a-mole booths scattered around with moles running everywhere.
Okay. But let me give you something else. So let's say that the Department of Transportation moves to Detroit and somebody wants to sue DOT because it makes a regulation that is unconstitutional. Okay. So now you're going to be in the Eastern District of Michigan suing at the district level rather than the DC district, right? And everybody who practices law will tell you that you will never sue these agencies in DC and win at the trial level. It always has to be at the appeals level or at the Supreme Court where you're going to win. They're going to appeal it anyway, but the point is that you're always going to lose at the trial court level. And that one reason, the one effect of that is that you can't get these agencies to settle at all unless it's one of these political BS deals, and this happens all the time. And it's also a function of this stuff happening in DC. Like, for example, the EPA would get sued or the Department of Interior gets sued by one of these environmental groups. And they'll say, oh, you're doing all this and it's bad for the environment and so on and so forth. The suit is a Potemkin thing. It's a fraud. Okay. EPA ginned up a lawsuit against itself, right? So these guys go and they sue and the EPA goes, oh no, that we just got sued. So we're going to have to settle this suit. And they make policy based on these sue and settle cases that all of the district judges in DC go, oh yeah, okay. And they sign off on these lawsuits. Now, if the EPA was in the American Spectator piece, I said that they should move it to the Aleutian Islands. And I don't know if there's a federal district court in the Aleutian Islands, but wherever. Let's say you moved it to Idaho or something, and they had to go to court in Idaho. And some judge in Idaho is going to look at this and go, no, I'm not going to accept that settlement because you're making public policy and it's unconstitutional. And no, that settlement doesn't go. Like, this is something that you actually can get a tangible benefit moving these things out of Washington and moving them to courts elsewhere in the country. Now, all of a sudden, these federal judgeships for the federal districts where these agencies are start to become a really big deal, more so than they are now, because they're going to get some of these regulatory cases. But I don't think that's a bad thing, because right now they all go into DC, and I mean, there have been some good Republican judges get nominated and confirmed to the DC District Court, but that is not a court that looks like the rest of the country. I mean, that is the DC Federal District Court is full of bad Clinton and Obama and now Biden appointees, and like that's a losing battle to try to get decent judges on that court. So the judicial load you could spread out around the country, and that would help.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm going
maybe so.
to close with this, and I'm going to say, and I'm going to call out Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise, and I'm going to say, Mike Johnson on the Judiciary Committee, there's enough right here in this show tonight to give you enough ideas to exercise that brain power of yours to try to move the needle. And you've got advance warning, and I'm sure Scott McKay will take your call.
I'll absolutely bug Mike about it. I'm going to send him the link to my deal when it comes out tomorrow, and I'm going to be like, look, you got to do this. And we'll see what he says. He's got to run for re-election, man. He's got to come up with an issue.
He's not worried about nothing. He's on
He
cruise
can say, "Hey, I'm going to bring
control.
the Department of Energy to Shreveport." And of course, you guys
Tell,
would be like,
tell
"No,
him,
don't bring that here."
tell
Just
him this.
tell him
Tell him,
Trump's going to be there and he wants to take a selfie with Mike, and Mike will be there. There you go.
tell him, look, Duke and Rex will actually talk nice about you on Bossier
All right.
Watch,
For once.
All right.
and
All right.
he'll
I'll
do it.
pass that promise along when I bug him tomorrow.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Scott, and we've got to discuss some other topics here. But and again, I agree with your premise 100%. I'm just more of an almost a completely lost cause type guy. So, but your premise is spot on.
The thing is this. I mean, and I guess I'll just leave y'all with this. I mean, look, these are big ideas. And I've got a book coming out on June 21st called The Revivalist Manifesto. And essentially the premise of the book is that the reason nothing works in America anymore is that we are at the end of a political era that began basically with the 1932 presidential election when FDR beat the hell out of Herbert Hoover, and brought in all of this stuff, the New Deal, the welfare state and regulatory state, military industrial complex, foreign adventurism abroad, internationalism, all this kind of stuff. And that era is ending because nothing works anymore. And the consensus that formed that era between, say, William F. Buckley conservatives and Daniel Patrick Moynihan liberals no longer exists, largely because both of those two kinds of people are like, nobody listens to them anymore, right? The Paul Ryans in the Republican Party and the Joe Manchins in the Democrat Party are pariahs, basically, among those parties' bases. So a new consensus is going to be formed, and it's either going to be from the AOC socialist type people doing it, or it's going to be, people I call revivalists, which are basically conservatives who want to go on offense, like me. And the opportunity is with the revivalists because that's kind of where the public is moving. I mean, you can see what the hard left is bringing to Joe Biden, which is 60% disapproval. And there's an opportunity for the Republican Party, if it is willing to do big things and not just be Mitch McConnell, play defense all the time, which nobody wants. Okay. And you see the talent in the Republican Party is all kind of Ron DeSantis type guys, right? Who are very, aggressive and are willing to take big issues on and do these kinds of things. So when this new political era dawns, and it's on the verge of dawning, you just need leadership to produce it. You can now look at issues like this, and you don't have to shy away from them thinking, that'll never happen. It actually can, because we're at the point where, like Charles Krauthammer said, that which cannot continue will not continue, and almost nothing of our political status quo can continue as is because it doesn't work, and everybody knows it doesn't work. So what I would say is, don't just automatically say, oh, well, we can't do this because, like it hadn't been done this way. We're going to come to a point very soon where lots of things that have never been politically possible are about to become that way. And I think moving agencies out of D.C. in the middle of everybody working remotely and doing all these different things is not implausible, because most people would look at that and go, well, yeah, my office is in Cleveland and I live in, Louisville. Like, what? Why do the feds all have to live and work in Washington, D.C.? I mean, like, that's not something that people are going to look at and go, oh, that's crazy. Because, I mean, they're living it in their own lives. And corporate America has been doing this for a while, and certainly after COVID, does it all the time. So, like, I think we can talk about this without people saying that we're nuts. Like, I think this is something that may actually, 5 to 10 years from now, everybody's going to believe that this is perfectly normal. And the best time to talk about it is now, and let's innovate, and let's be smarter than the rest, and let's lead.
Yeah,
anyway, that's my sales pitch. So that's what I got for you.
I can't disagree with you with any of that. As a matter of fact, we probably need to have you back on another episode, coming up in the future, and we'll kind of refine the plan. We'll have everything in place where when the time is perfect, we just put it in place.
Sounds good. I love solving all
fix the whole country. Wham, done.
All right, everybody. y'all check out Scott McKay and the okay, so what is it again? The
The
article.
American Spectator. The article is going to be at spectator.org in the morning. Otherwise, check me out at thehayride.com, where we talk about a lot of Louisiana stuff. And be watching out, because the Revivalist Manifesto is gonna be available all over the place on the 21st of June.
We'll take a look at it.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Scott.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, have a good one. Well, that's definitely a way to start off the show with a bang.
Yeah, we just jumped right straight into it. We didn't even
No,
hold back.
no countdown, no nothing. Wham! We just served it right up. What did y'all think of that, folks? That was quite the soapbox.
Yeah, I didn't
But
even
I
get to
agree.
go in. Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, look, it jumped out at me because I've been screaming that DC is broke. I mean, if you watch this show, you hear me rail about it all the time that it's broke, and I mean, it's something has to change, something has to give, and I mean, he was articulating that. I mean, I think there's probably a lot more people who are on the same page that feel the exact same way, just like we were saying that something's got to change. And I don't know that our elected officials, the Mike Johnsons, the John Kennedys, you know, I don't think they realize that we all feel the same way. I don't
I
think
don't
they realize that we're the majority on this.
I don't think that they do either, and I'll kind of wrap my little part of this up with this, that I think the problem is, I think Scott is right, and what you were alluding to, which is that we have a lack of leadership, because a lot of people feel this way, but they just go and they go vote if they vote. We all know how those percentages usually are. We end up with basically the same people or the same type of people every time, because there's a complete lack of leadership. It's one of the things that Trump did excite people on the right about, and some people on the left, was at least he appeared to give, and in many cases did, show and have that leadership. And, of course, he didn't get reelected, and we all know how all that turned out. But I agree that we've got to have some real leadership there, not just people giving us platitudes on sound bites on Fox News.
Well, Washington, D.C. is not representative of the American people.
It is not.
Think about that. It is not. It is not representative of the American people. And it's up to everybody watching this show for you to get your elected representatives to make a change. They're not going to do it unless they hear from you. And a good way to break up this whole cabal. I mean, the people in Washington, D.C., they could care less about what you and I think out here. They don't give a crap. All they want is to ensure that they got their next check. But it's our elected officials who could make that thing change, and it's all about us pressuring them to make that change. And you got to let them know if they don't hear it, they ain't going to do anything.
Yep, I agree. Jamie Marie Pope says we can't even figure out leadership in our state capital. I have little faith in figuring it out nationally. We're almost in the same boat there, Jamie Marie. All right. So that's covering the swamp on Bossier Watch, which is relevant because, of course, the national stuff definitely affects us around here locally. So what is up next? I think because we're a little limited on time tonight, we got about 45 minutes left, or a few minutes less than that, actually. So shall we go ahead and let's move into Judge Smith's opinion, and then with whatever time we have left, we'll start on the active shooter stuff. We may not want to.
Yeah, I think
We
so.
may not want to get too far into that because it might scare our guests that we have scheduled and lined up for next week into not coming on the show.
Yeah, let's get with the First Church stuff. I know a lot of people are waiting on pins and needles for us to discuss First Church. So if you have friends that are saying, "Hey, tag me," or let me know when they start talking about it, okay, we're going to talk about it.
And let me also lead out there with this as well, is our guest next week. We've got everything set up, so unless something major happens and he's not able to make it, but it's now on the screen, we'll have Sheriff Julian Whittington on next week. Is that correct, Duke?
Yeah, Tuesday night. But hey, Thursday night, we've got a pretty amazing
Oh,
show
yes.
already this week. We're gonna do an extra show. Normally, that was the Louisiana Watch thing, and we're getting into this identity crisis thing that we had. But we have got uh, Secretary Kyle Ardoin going to come on Thursday. And remember, back when we were stuffing ballots, apparently the word got out, and I think he wants to talk to us about us stuffing ballots. And
Hey,
so
I just played the
we
video. You in
we
trouble.
well well, we said, "Okay, we'll talk, but we gotta do it on a live show for the whole world to see." And he agreed.
All right.
So, Thursday night, we got Kyle Ardoin, and we're gonna talk about where we're going with, election integrity in the state of Louisiana. So, are all of y'all's ballots being read by the Dominion machines correctly?
Hmm.
Or are you voting for a squirrel?
Yeah.
Who knows? But we're
But
going to
to
find out.
But tune in Thursday night. We'll have a notification posted up and all that. But tune in Thursday night, and we're going to hear from the man himself. And then again next Tuesday night, we've got Sheriff Julian Whittington scheduled to come on and talk about school safety around.
Yeah, so if Kyle Ardoin can't ensure us that your vote is secure, then we're going to have the sheriff come on Tuesday and tell us what we can do about it.
Right. There you go. Okay. So let's get into Judge Smith's opinion. I think I'll start us off. Let me share out my screen here. And let me make this a little larger so people can see it. So this is Tracy Long Davis's post from a couple of days ago, from May the 28th, and she's talking about the opinion that was rendered in the First Church case, and she's got the latest public docs posted, and she posted this publicly. And she said, to clarify, since she was in court, the wording on pages 2 and 4, looking at 3 regarding designated funds, are a little off. It was clarified in court that the plaintiffs did not request the names of the donors, only the amounts that were given to designated funds. That wording isn't in this document. She says, just to clarify, designated funds are designated by the donor, and those funds are required to be used for that particular use only. For instance, if somebody designated funds for high school missions, that money is required to be used for high school missions. You aren't supposed to transfer that money into the general budget. That'll make a little more sense here in a second when we kind of go through the pages of this opinion. So, just as a reminder for those of you that might be new to the show and watching tonight, we've got about 120 plus people watching. We're glad to have all of you across Facebook and YouTube. We are not broadcasting on Louisiana Watch anymore, but I did at least share a link out to the show. So, anyway, we're glad to have everybody. So, comment away and I'll try to put them up here. But to remind everybody, the reason that we talk about First Church is A, it is a major topic in this town, and B, the ties between direct ties between First Church and politics, those strings are wound tight, and those knots are tied very tightly. So that's the reason that we're discussing this, and it's a very public lawsuit now. Okay, so with that said, let's move
And
into
and
this.
and arguably, I think maybe where some of this divide in First Church Rex, and we haven't completely talked about this, I think it revolves around social issues and politics.
It
Now,
does. Yeah.
you know, so getting into the Southern Baptist Convention and ideology, and getting into what is the movement or the thing that Pastor Brad started or is a part of. Um,
Southern something, some kind of network.
I,
Anyway,
yeah. Anyway, but I think I think it might have been a movement that was a little bit, I mean, more conservative, or wanted to be more strict, according to the teachings of the Bible, than maybe say what the Southern Baptist Convention was. And you know, I don't know that 100% to be the case. It's
well,
kind of way I read between the lines.
it's kind of in the name. Our friend who watches the show, Tracy Long Davis, reminds us it's Conservative Baptist Network. So it's right there in the name. It's supposed to be pretty conservative. I think the problem may be some of the tie-ins to First Church and Brad's past issues at the other church, and all this. It's a tangled web.
Yeah, but if you come to a church that you've got folks that have been there for 30, I mean, generational family ties to a church, and they have had their beliefs, principles, they've I mean, Dr. Fred was there. I mean, good gracious, how many years? And, they had what they believed. They had the foundation of what they believed, and they were moving things in a direction. They supported the missions that they supported. And then all of a sudden you have somebody comes in and completely, uproots all of that and sends it off in a different direction. I mean, without, and we can say this arguably without the support of the people who have been there the longest, because if the people who had been there the longest and had supported all of these missions had supported it, we wouldn't be here today with a lawsuit, right?
Well, true, and I want to point this out as well, again, for those of you that are new watching, that this isn't information from, one or two disgruntled church members that, whatever happened, they were disgruntled. This is coming from literally dozens and hundreds, maybe even a thousand or so, I don't know the total count, of former members who either left the church or were literally kicked out. And it's into a lawsuit, and the judge, for the most part, Judge Smith, for the most part, ruled for the side of the plaintiffs for the vast majority of it.
Now, yeah, now that brings up an interesting thing, because in the comments I see that somebody pointed out, they said check out Paige Patterson. Now, in the last show, I think didn't we cover, yeah, we covered Paige
Yes.
Patterson, and we covered, you know, so I would pose this question. We're not going to rehash that,
Right.
but where does that leave the folks who have left First Church and the folks that are at First Church? Where does that leave people if that in fact is what we're looking for? And what was it? $5 million. The five, and Paige Patterson
Right.
left
The
over there
anonymous
and went and
anonymous
started
donation and all that.
the anonymous. Yeah. What if that does link back to Bozier? What if it doesn't?
Well,
If that is what everybody's looking for,
mm-hmm.
and it was kind of under the radar, where does that leave everybody? What if they don't find any, nothing, no problem whatsoever, now that the judge has ruled and said, okay, we're going to turn over everything? Where does that leave everybody?
Yeah. And look, I'll be the first to say, if there is nothing in the financials, but that's another challenge in and of itself because of the judge's ruling, because, well, they got to sign an NDA. So they can't publicly, I would assume under the NDA, won't be able to publicly disclose the financials, and that's okay. But I wonder what the limitations are going to be on discussing what was or wasn't found. But I'll be the first to say that if through all this process, let's say that a miracle happens and everything was completely on the up and up, we'll come back and report that.
But I don't think, here's what I think. I think first, before Pastor Brad and the rest of them, before they turn anything over, I would guess that they're probably going to appeal, and they'll send it to, up to, Jeff Thompson, Jeff Cox, and all those guys. And I'm just wondering what they'll do. I mean, I would, Thompson, he's perused the halls of First Church, standing at the door and jetting out of there at the end of Sunday school so he could make it to the next church to Glad Hand. So I'm just curious as to what those cats are going to do. Maybe they won't appeal. Maybe they will just turn over all the documents and share what they will with everybody. And um, I don't know. Something tells me we're going to be back in court, because
I think so. As a
what
matter,
it what these court documents, didn't they say that they had to keep it all hush and on the down low?
for the most part, we're about to pull them up. I want to share this comment from Julie Ferris, which kind of ties into it. She says the American Association of Christian Counselors found that 31.2% of active ordained pastors scored in the diagnostic range for narcissistic personality disorder. I think that number is low. And look, I have nothing against churches, large, medium, or small at all, of course. I would tend to probably agree with Julie's assumption there, but that ties right back into I don't think Brad will let this go because whether there's anything right or wrong in the books or the numbers, he's not going to let it go because he wants it to be all about him. So, just my
Well, he
take on
can't.
this. And
He
full disclosure, I don't know Brad other than what I've researched here, what I've seen online, and I think I may have met him in passing once.
I have met him. I met him one night, and I met him at Mike Johnson's winning congressional thing at his victory party. That's when
Yes,
I met Pastor Brad.
that's
Was one night.
that's where I'm at. Yep.
Yeah, and my point is he is political. He should be a pastor, and he shouldn't be political. I mean, and that gets into the issue of should churches be political? Should they not?
Well,
Yeah,
look, I don't have a
no.
problem with them being political. Remove the 501c3 status.
Well, but here's what happens when you start bringing the politics into your church. Should you seek to have elected officials who have a moral compass and are guided by God and the Bible? Yes, you should. Absolutely, I agree with that totally, 100%. But I disagree totally with you using your church to do it and you bringing your church in it, because you know what happens? Exactly what has happened to First Church.
Well, sure.
That's what happens.
Sure, but that goes back to leadership. It's not that that inherently happens at every church because it's a church. It's because of leadership or lack thereof. That's kind of my take on it. All right. So let's go ahead and let me get over here to, let's see, let me hit, take me just a second. Let me get the screenshots up. Let me get rid of the Legos, although those are cool looking Legos. I need a set of those Legos. All right, let me
Okay,
hit
so
this button.
there's a lot of comments. There's a lot of
Mhm.
comments and people saying exactly, says you're missing nothing, says and therein lies the problem. Remove the politicians from his staff. I mean, I think that's what happened, but it was coming. And look, I'm going to argue, and there's a lot of people watching, and a lot of y'all like our show, and you may or you may not like me, but I'm going to say this, and you're probably not going to like me, but you were there, and you let it happen while you were there.
Yeah, it's
You should have shut it down.
just like I was telling Scott McKay. You can't blame Washington, folks. It's our fault. Same thing here. And I know some of you, a lot of you have spoken up now, but a lot of you have stayed silent. A lot of you I've had conversations with that were former members in person, but you won't speak up publicly. And I get it. There's some biblical, precedent for doing that. There's also biblical precedent after you've gone to somebody, what is it, once, and they don't correct the problem, then you go and get somebody and take them. So there's biblical precedent for doing this and leading up to what's here. The problem is, well, anyway, yeah.
No, I'll sum this up for you. I'll sum this up for you. After the last time I ran for House District 8, and it had Raymond Cruz in the race, and I like Raymond. I do
Yeah, he's a
like
nice
Raymond.
guy. Yeah,
I think he's a nice guy. I really
yeah.
do. I think his heart's in the right place. I really do. And you had Robbie Gaddy. And after that was over with, and I think it was oh, good grief, what's the guy that we were talking about that they deleted his emails, the interview guy with, was it Channel 3 12 6?
Oh yeah, Doug Warner.
Doug Warner. Yeah, I think it was him. I think it was him. He sent me and he'd asked me, he says, well, what do you think the reason was that you lost? And you know what I said, Rex? I said, because I was unwilling to use my faith to get elected.
Yeah.
I literally used to go to Cypress Baptist, but I moved out of Cypress Baptist to Bel Air Baptist to a church that wasn't in the district so that nobody would accuse me of using my faith to get elected. And you know what? I got my brains beat out for it. I even had my faith questioned in that race.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is everybody watching, you may find this offensive, but the bottom line is politicians use their faith to get elected. It's a freaking fact.
They do it all
And
the
you
time.
can say I'm crazy, but it is reality. And we elect people based on whether or not they're sitting on the pew with us at our church. Y'all can be mad at me all you want, but it's the freaking truth.
I cannot disagree with that.
Anyway, go on.
Certainly can't. Okay. So I'm not really sure. I've gone through this opinion some just a little while ago, and folks, I understand that it may be a little fuzzy. You might not can read it, but it is posted on Tracy Long Davis's Facebook page. You can go look her up. She has it published publicly, so you don't have to be a friend of hers to see this. It's actually on Twitter, and that copy is a little fuzzier. So I'm going to try to kind of muddle through this, and we'll post this or share Tracy's post out on Bossier Watch's page as well. But anyway, so here's the opinion. I'm not going to read it word for word. I'm going to try to skim through it. But the matter came before the court on May the 17th. Present for plaintiffs was Allison Jones and for defendants Michael Lowe. The matters taken up by the court were exceptions filed by the defense. One, exception of prematurity as to the plaintiffs, Michael B. Cockerham, Clinton Skates, and Henry Smith. Number two, exception of no right of action by the plaintiffs. And number three, exception of no cause of action as to the request for production of certain documents. And so, a bunch of legal jargon there. Let's see. After a pretrial conference, the court granted the exception of prematurity as to the three named plaintiffs and denied the exception of no right of action. The parties agreed the exception dealt with certain requested documents as shown in Exhibit 1. The plaintiffs requested 34 items. Yeah. Stop me at any point.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you're there.
All right. The plaintiffs requested 34 items. The defendants have produced 17 of the requested items, with 16 in dispute by the parties. Item 27 was not addressed. Is the court's understanding that the parties have an agreement with regard to confidentiality and non-disclosure, which will apply to the items which the court believes should be produced herein? So that tells me that they're going to have to sign NDAs to be able to view those documents. Somebody that was there knows more legal jargon than we do. You know, we only play lawyers on Facebook. Let us know.
Well, see, my take, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but my take is that they've got it in the record that they made an agreement, to not disclose some of what they're going to see. And I think you and I started touching on it earlier. So what happens, let's play devil's advocate here.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when they get some of these documents and they see that, okay, maybe, Brad did steer money to Paige Patterson or not? That $5 million. What happens if they see in the documents that $5 million was steered over there and then steered to what was the company? Was it? No, it wasn't Sage Grass. What was it? That other is Paige Patterson's personal, little,
his fun deal that he had going.
Yeah, his personal little fun thing. What happens if they see that? So if they see that, do they file another lawsuit?
Yeah.
Sandy Creek. Yeah. Do they file another lawsuit?
Well, maybe, but some of this may get into actual criminal activity, and so then we're dealing with the DA's office. And well, I'm not going to say good old boys network, but you never know.
Well, an interesting thing came across my radar today. Somebody messaged me and they said, I'm not surprised by the judge ruling against Pastor Brad. Mm-hmm. And what, of course I said, why? And the answer that they gave me really jumped out at me and shocked me and surprised me.
Really?
And
what was?
Yeah, and I'm fixing to surprise you.
Probably. Here we go.
Well, guess who did a lot of campaigning and helped this judge when he ran for election?
I haven't even dug into that angle. Who would that be?
There's pictures on Facebook, and he advertised about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Drum roll. I still don't have a dadgum drum roll sound effect.
Okay.
Every time I say this, and I don't have it. All right. So
in some circles, he's called the Joe Biden of Bossier. In some circles, he's called Tahoe Tommy.
What? No way.
Look it up. Look it up. I'm not making it up. I mean, I was texted that and it caught me off guard. It really did. I had to stop and kind of think
Hmm.
about it a little bit. But yeah, there's a
Maybe.
thing. Now what is the connection there?
Yeah.
Did didn't Tommy get his 5 minutes of fame on the stage at First Church? Like the Zamboni driver?
No, he did
Oh, that's
not.
that's right.
He
He
did
sure
not.
didn't, did
Now,
he?
in full disclosure, unless I missed one of the services that they broadcast where he did get that, but it was my understanding and our understanding that he was denied his 5 minutes of fame. Now, we may stand to be corrected on that. Greg Bell gives us the link, so he's got it in the comments. It's Charles Smith for Judge, the Facebook page for that. He says for your bookmarkies. Wow.
You that is unbelievable.
David
Wow.
David Jones raises an interesting question: is an NDA solid when criminal activities are found?
Well,
Good question.
what I didn't read in here, and maybe Greg Bell can help us on this in this legal moment jumbo. So is it, with I think one of the charges or claims that the plaintiffs made was that Pastor Brad changed the rules and the board, and he
The
changed
bylaws and
everything,
all that, yeah.
yeah, without and not in compliance with the written bylaws of the church. I didn't When I read this, I didn't get or glean a idea of what his, I mean, I don't know that he had to make a ruling on that, but I didn't glean what direction or what he was trying to say. I almost feel like he avoided that issue, or it wasn't ruled on, or we didn't see it in this.
I was trying to scan through. These are the, let's see. It is further ordered the defendant's exception to no cause action is denied as to the following items. Um, okay, so they were trying
Tra-
to do the exception for
yeah,
that. Tracy can help us
Tracy,
out.
yeah,
Okay,
Tracy Davis.
yeah. That's a separate suit and will be heard on June 21st, according to Tracy.
Yeah, so that would make sense. So I would be inclined to believe that if this suit is saying, hey, you've got to provide all these documents according to, what the state law says, I would be inclined to believe that the next suit, the plaintiffs are probably going to prevail there as well, because there's no way he changed all those rules arbitrarily without, you know, complying with the state law. I you know, he
Right.
obviously Brad didn't feel like he has to provide any of this with the changes that he made. The judge says otherwise. Yeah, you do have to provide this. So seems to me that we already have a glimpse into what the next ruling is going to be.
Right. Um, yeah, and folks, again, we'll post this so you can go through it more. Let's see, listing of all individuals issued church cell phones back to and including fiscal year 2013. All contractual obligations for the past 3 years and copies of contracts, all credit purchasing card statements for the past 48 months, and record of who approved each statement. That could prove to be interesting. Um,
Loan documents, approvals.
yeah, property
At
and
one
liability
time,
insurance policies.
at one time, I think it was right there, kind of at the bottom, 11, 12, something like that. At one time, there was some discussion about the uh, number or the quantity of loans that were outstanding with Citizens National Bank in Bossier. Now, I don't know what's become of all of that, but anyway, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to bite my tongue on that one. We'll hold that one for a future show.
Yes, let's. We still have more to talk about, folks. So, um, anyway, it's very interesting reading here. Let me see if I can get to the right page that I wanted to show. Let's see, because there were some things that they are not going to have denied to, and there's kind of one of them I think that stuck out. Let me see if I can scan through here and find it real quick. Hold on, let's get this out of the way. Okay. So they
Well,
were they
look. Here's another question. Damian Brooks says Brad's House of Cards is coming down like manna from heaven. Not so fast, Dano. I
yeah.
mean,
This is
look here.
step one.
What what was lost? What was lost in the fire, guys? No, the judge didn't approve servers, and the only one some of the only stuff that he didn't approve was the digital stuff and the computer system database and software, in which I kind of thought that was funny myself looking at the suit as well, because if I was Brad and them, the first thing I'm going to say is, well, we lost all that in the fire in the first place.
Well,
We
now
ain't got none of that.
refresh my memory. Did we talk about one time that they had claimed that they didn't have backups either, or that they had local backups which got burned up? I can't remember for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Wait a minute.
All right,
Heather Michelle
Heather
Turner
says,
says the
yeah,
servers. Okay. Well, I don't know when that took place. I don't know that that's accurate or not, because I mean, we did an extensive on that fire at the church, and as I understand it, they sent the hard drives, or some of them. I have to
they
go back and look
tried
at that stuff.
they tried yeah
They
they tried to recover data from the hard drives, and typically, now Heather, they I'll defer to you on that if you have some better information than we do. They very well may have had backups and thought, well, there's enough data that if we can recover it from the local drives, it's faster to recover that than if they were using something like Amazon's cold storage, which is a very slow recovery but much less expensive. They may have attempted that just to do a faster recovery. That would be the exception that I would say. But yeah, we absolutely covered that they were told the data could not be recovered.
Yeah, I got sidetracked here. I'm looking at my clock.
Yeah, we got less than
Now,
14 minutes, and I'm gonna have to cut us off.
well, I will tell you that I did get Rex here pertaining to that fire.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did get, remember, supposedly, I mean, it wasn't the cause of the fire, but the battery backup. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, the
Somebody in the
UPS guy.
comments, yeah, somebody in the comments, Jason Angle makes a comment, is the insurance company going to look at the fire payment again? Well, I had a source reported to me that the insurance company actually had the battery backup sent off for testing, and that the results of that were that the battery backup was not the cause of the fire.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Let me put this back on bigger screen. So we have reliable information that the insurance
Well,
company
I'm it was an
or
anonymous
fair.
source.
Okay.
I'm not going to say
Okay.
reliable.
I want
I'm
to
not
make
going to
sure.
say reliable.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was what was conveyed. Now, look, I got to tell you, we went through all that stuff, and it was sketchy. I mean, we were suspect of it for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how all of that ties into all of this, because I think they're connected. I really do. I think there's more going on here than meets the eye. What I
There's a
don't
lot
know
of
is
smoke. There's literally has to be fire somewhere.
I don't know that they're going to get all the answers via this lawsuit and via this ruling from the judge. I just don't know that they're going to get it.
I don't either. He also
I
denied
literally,
them.
I literally just got a message from somebody, and I have to say anonymous source here, but I know who they
Right.
are, that says you're correct about the battery backup.
Very interesting. The plot thickens. And Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but um, the judge is not allowing them to access to the list of all donations made for designated restricted purposes, which I think is what Tracy's post was about, back to and including fiscal year 2013. I find that a little interesting if he doesn't let them have access to that. I got a couple of mosquitoes in here. Especially if they were not asking for the names of the donors, just the donations themselves. Okay, Tracy says correct. Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. Tracy, was there any indication that that the plaintiffs may get access to the donation amounts and the designated purposes, or they just got shot down completely?
Yeah, because even the plaintiffs made the day that I went to the court, the plaintiffs made the point that they were not seeking the names and or the phone numbers or information about the individuals that made the donations. They simply wanted the amounts and the purpose. That's what they wanted for the amounts and what they were given and the purpose for those that giving. That was
Hmm.
all they sought.
All right, so Tracy says, not to my knowledge, looks like shot down completely. Well, maybe the lawyers will figure out some little lawyer maneuvering type stuff on appeal, because I just have a feeling this is definitely not the end of it, and there's the other suit deal coming up anyway. Okay, so again, folks, we will share this out on Bossier Watch. So I guess depending on which side of the coin you're on, the upside is looks like about 3/4 of everything was ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. About 25% of it was ruled not in favor of the plaintiffs, in favor of the defendants. But this is definitely going to open up more information and at least give the plaintiffs an opportunity to inspect most of the information that they were seeking. But I agree with you, Duke. The real question is going to be, well, when you get in there and dig around, what happens if you don't find what you're looking for?
Well, and seems like, and I hate to kind of go here, but when I was poking around on that Page Patterson stuff, for some reason it seems like there was an insurance connection. Hmm.
Hmm. Well, very well could be. Very well could be. And I
I,
want to
you know, I,
Well, go ahead. But while you're pondering on that for a second, let me go back to our screenshots. Let me share this one out too. This is from Twitter. So for those of you that have a Twitter account, by the way, we may do some Twitter Spaces, which is audio stuff in the future. We'll talk about that in another show. You may want to go
you know,
follow on.
this this subject matter would be a great, show for Twitter Spaces to where
Yeah,
everybody, because we got a lot of folks engaging, to where they could engage and comment on it. That would be
yeah, we can
I
have up to like
probably.
13 people. And look, the truth is, we can have four more people on our show. For any of you that want to come on and discuss this as a guest, reach out to us and you're welcome to come on. We'll set it up on a future show. We can do it like we are now, but the Twitter Spaces deal, we could have up to 13 people and it's audio only. So that could be
And
pretty
how
interesting.
many folks watching would like to, you know, get on and comment and talk about this a little bit? I
Yeah.
mean, just out of curiosity, how many of y'all would like to get on and actually talk about it?
Yeah, just a,
Just
a group
wondering.
discussion. Yeah. Yeah, let us know in the comments. All right. So if you have a Twitter account, or even if you don't, you can go look this up, but look up the SBC Pantologist because he shares quite a bit of information. He received an email from 2016 and was told this was one of 6 payments that totaled 100 grand. It shows being paid from designated funds that were not listed as SWBTS. Is that legal? Jerkovich denies the money was for Page. Was that a lie? Now, let me see if I can pull up this. I think this is, well, no, hold on. That's another comment. Let me find the right one. Here we go. Here's the copy of the email. Duke, I'm going to cut us both off for a second. But dear, and of course it's redacted. Please do 2 check requests this morning. First, do 10,000 from the Direct Missions Designated Fund to the Southwestern Horner House Endowment. Needs to be delivered to Lorene by 1:30 today. Let's see. Second, do a $3,000 check from the Direct Missions Fund to the San Diego Southern Baptist Association, etc. So, anyway, the point is the SBC Pantologist has some interesting information that he or she is sharing as well, including this giant loss for Jerkovich in the court system today. Judge ruled against him on all but 6 requests, and those 6 were all very minor. I would argue some of them weren't maybe very minor, but anyways, required to turn over virtually all financials since 2013. A huge win. This was a great day for the righteous. Hmm.
What I'm
So,
wondering, how does Brad, and Lorraine, and how do they get around not providing all these documents? Because something tells me that they're going to ghost in the machine. That not everything is going to make its way. I mean, there's going to be more suits. This
Oh
isn't
yeah,
over.
this is definitely not over. So we have a lot more to talk about on this subject. There's no doubt about that. And for those of you that are very involved in the lawsuit, um, feel free to email us copies to Bossier, any information you have to BossierWatch at protonmail.com. Make your own anonymous account if you don't have one. If you don't want, to be a known source, and shoot us an email to BossierWatch at protonmail.com. And again, I just want to reiterate, this is not Rex and Duke trying to take down a church or anything like that. We're trying to share the information that is apparently insanely interesting to everybody, and our approach and angle to it is the political side.
Well, in
All
in
right.
other news, and we'll
Yeah.
close with this real fast. Go to crap. Go to cut. Oh,
Which one?
I don't have it put up.
What are you looking for? Sounds
Go to my
like.
hog. Go to the
Oh,
hog. I'm
yeah.
proud of the
Well,
hog. Go
all
to the
right.
hog.
Yeah, so, in full disclosure, those of you that don't hunt might want to change screens. Let's see which one we want to go to first. How about we'll go to
Pick
this
one
one
up.
first? Yeah, there we go.
1, 2, and 3. All right. Look at that hog right there, guys. Look at the teeth on that dude.
One
That is
less
in Bossier
pig.
Parish, Louisiana.
Yeah, one less pig
That
around this area to breed and tear things up.
that is That is my good friend Josh Phelps that I went to school with. Halton. He was a year younger than me, but anyway, graduated with him. We killed that hog on my farm up in Plain Dealing. This dude, he cost me a ton of money. This hog literally caused me to lose all the water in my crawfish pond twice this year. It takes about $500 to pump $500 in diesel to pump the water up in the field. And this hog literally was rooting out my water control structure. He did it
Wow,
twice.
wow.
Well, we finally got even. We got even with him. And Josh Phelps, he again brought his dogs up there. And I feel sorry for his dogs. But I
Yeah, I'm
mean,
not so sure I
Josh
want to
said
show
this.
that picture to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, that one's not for the faint of heart, but
Right.
these things are a nuisance,
Yeah.
and we eliminated a nuisance here. And if you think that hogs are not a bad problem, they are a bad
Ooh,
problem.
they're terrible, and they're
And
everywhere, and they're breeding quickly.
yeah, so uh, a shout out if y'all need a hog, somebody to eliminate hogs, reach out to me. I got a good friend; he can help you with your problem. I mean, I had it; they were rooting out my levees, causing my water control structure to fail and losing a pond. And anyway,
Well,
that's it.
that one won't be causing that trouble anymore. All right, folks, we've got to cut it off a little short tonight because I have a Zoom session I got to be on here in about a minute and a half. We'll talk some more about this Texas active shooter course coming up because it's very interesting and, of course, very relevant to what's been going on in South Texas with the school shooting. We haven't really addressed that. We do have Sheriff Julian Whittington on next Tuesday evening. We'll be discussing the school system and protection and measures and all that sort of thing. And we will have Secretary of State, Louisiana Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin on Thursday nights around 7 p.m. Right, Duke?
Yep, that's right. He is scheduled to be here, so y'all please tune in. You're going to want to know whether your vote counts or not, and what is going to be the election system to come, and how are you going to vote? Is it going to be you're going to put your fingerprint on it? Is it going to be a paper ballot? Is it going to be a Dominion machine? Which I hear that on Friday, CISA is putting out a report saying that beware of the vulnerabilities of Dominion machines from hacking.
That will be interesting. Okay, folks, we got to wrap it up. I got to hit the finish button in the software. As soon as I get off of my Zoom session, I will post the lawsuit screenshots. And so we stay in the good graces of the clerk of court's office. I'm not going to post a PDF link, but we'll at least put the screenshots up there. Anyway, we appreciate everybody watching. Hope y'all got a little bit of interesting information tonight. Y'all stay tuned and join us Thursday night. That's not our normal night for Bossier Watch. Join us Thursday night. It's going to be interesting.
Yep. Good night, y'all.
Good night. We're out of here.